I didn't say story. Avatar, James Cameron's highest-grossing film of all time before inflation, has received the reputation of being nothing more than an expensive after-school special, a retread of the same story we've heard in a gaggle of films towards a spectrum of audiences, and yet, even though it has gone from one of my top 10 favorite films in high school to maybe one of my top 50 now, something about it still absorbs me. Gets me wrapped up and invested. Avatar sets up many standard characters to tell a standard man versus nature story. There's a military working for a corporation, they're tasked with negotiating with the natives to move from their homes, they hire a sole military man to learn their ways and earn their trust, and said military man ends up falling in love with the nature and the chief's daughter. Yeah, you look at the bare bones of this, it's basically Pocahontas. I think anyone watching the trailer knows that going in. But thankfully, it doesn't just stick to the bare bones. It does flesh it out into a well-developed, intricate, and emotionally stirring version of the story that we've heard in other subpar forms. So, this week, I thought I'd dive into how Avatar turns out to be not a great story, but a great piece of storytelling. And for the sake of this video, I'm taking the groundbreaking and admittedly pretty visuals and stuffing them into their own box. That aspect has already been praised, and that's not what we're focusing on today. Yes, the CGI looks more realistic than it ever has before. Yes, the neon colors are pretty. Yes, the 3D still holds up to this day. And yes, after looking over She-Hulk last week, looking over CGI this amazing is extremely refreshing. Check, done, we're focusing on the writing today. Deal? Deal.
Let's dance.
Some of the most important aspects of writing complex characters is creating conflicting motivations, setting a priority for them, and developing them by the end of their arc. And the way these characters are written gives them each of those aspects, despite their roles being pretty standard. Jake Sully, played by Sam Worthington, establishes early on that he believes in accomplishing a more noble and honorable mission than serving corporate dogs that the Marines are serving on Pandora, but he jumps into it anyway because he needs the money to fix his legs so that he can go out and perform more noble missions, and only leaves it when he discovers he can serve a more honorable mission, and not to mention get his legs back, as part of the Na'vi. Dr. Grace Augustine, played by Sigourney Weaver, has a firm belief in the biological and scientific aspects of life over the Na'vi's religious, hocus-pocus aspects, but that same belief leads her to discover an intricate network within the nature of Pandora that she deems more valuable than any rock. And she also has a strong relationship with the natives that's been around ever since she started a school to teach them English, and in her dying breath, she realizes the truth behind the natives' beliefs.
I'm with her, Drake. She's real.
Each of the natives holds a firm belief in their religion, which ultimately leads them to be conflicted between preventing the Sky People, as they call them, from destroying their homes and their people as they have in the past, and maintaining their faith in their deity, Awa, when she sends a sign that Jake is worthy of training up and making one of the people. And you see that conflict as they first grow suspicious bringing him in, learning to trust him as he develops, and feeling betrayed as they learn of his previously true motives, and not one of them behaves the same way. For instance, when Sute, Etukan, and Natiri shun Jake for his betrayal, Moat gives him a chance to help them as they're being attacked.
If you are one of us, help us.
I'll even make an argument for the two villains that everyone says are cartoony. Parker Selfridge, played by Giovanni Ribisi, can be summed up in this one line.
Killing the indigenous looks bad, but there's one thing that shareholders hate more than bad press, and that's a bad quarterly statement. I didn't make up the rules.
There's so much to break down in this line, it's crazy that people think that he's simple. Yes, he's basically saying that money is his priority, that he's after nothing but the highly valuable unobtainium. Yeah, okay, that's pretty silly. But he also acknowledges how killing the indigenous looks, that he knows that it's a bad move, and you see him conflicting with this throughout his performance, before and after he lets rockets fly. I mean, if he was really so stone cold as to just flat out kill the Na'vi, why did he give Jake 1 second, let alone 1 hour, to convince them to evacuate? Plus, he acknowledges that he didn't make up the rules, that there are people above him that would not be happy with him if he denied them their profit for the sake of some tree-hugging primates. And yes, very much so yes. I'll even make an argument for Lieutenant Quaritch, played by Stephen Lang. His cold and angry persona stems from his previous experience with Pandora. With that said, there are a few glimmers of light in his personality that I don't think very many people catch on to. One is his boss, who needs to give him the approval to fire any rockets on the natives, so he does have that respect for his higher-ups. The other is his humble relationship, marine to marine, with Jake. He has respect for his work in Venezuela, he professionally gives him the mission to learn the Na'vi ways, and he's willing to repay him for his hard work. It's only when that relationship gets severed and he gets the go-ahead from Selfridge that he lets out his cold, brutal, drinking coffee while firing rockets on innocent natives thrust of rage and terror against Pandora. The only characters in this that are kind of one note are some of the side characters like Norm, Max, and to a lesser degree Trudy. But man, guys, there is much more depth and development in these characters underneath their photorealistic skin.
I will fly with you.
Everyone knows how this story typically goes down. The good guy goes on a mission to learn the ways of the natives, then once he learns those ways, he starts to fall in love with the nature, with the religion, and typically with the chief's daughter. And yet, when Jake gives this line that perfectly sums up what I just said...
Look, at first, it was just orders, and then everything changed. I fell in love with the forest, and with the Kaya people, with you.
I believe him. That's the sort of line that's typically just thrown in for writer's convenience, but the way the story grows and develops, you see him take the steps from being a man on the job to becoming one of the people in his tribe. This movie establishes stock plot lines like that, but develops them in a way that doesn't feel stock, but rather feels earned. Jake and Neytiri, for instance, do get together as one would expect, but it's not just a case of the pretty boy and the pretty girl that are seen on screen together have to get together. You see their relationship develop from Neytiri not trusting Jake and begrudgingly training him in their ways, to starting to have fun with their training, to getting frustrated with him because he's getting closer to earning his place but is still being a scown or moron, to earning her respect and being playful with him, especially when he learns to ride a banshee, to nearly tearing up, much like some of the other characters when he becomes one of the people, to being regretful if he doesn't choose her, to being thankful that he does. Even the environmental message doesn't feel hammered in because it doesn't just say, oh, I thought I was right, but it turns out I'm wrong. You see Jake's struggle from the beginning to interact with the nature of Pandora, his misunderstanding of how it functions, and how much of a better person, not just a tribe member, he is when he does know how to work with it, and you understand from the character traits established early on why he chooses to work with it. Avatar takes baby steps with its plot lines, while other films that have told this story before have been known to take giant leaps, because James Cameron is one of the few filmmakers to understand that success is a journey, not a destination.
Outstanding.
All of this comes down to the one thing that everyone comes to a James Cameron film to see. Not groundbreaking visuals, not well-constructed action, though again, those are merits, but rather a passionate filmmaker simply telling the story that he wants to tell. Most of the time you would have to see a filmmaker slum it at least once to get his passion project off the ground, but Cameron is, or rather hopefully still is, but definitely was at the time, in a particularly interesting place where he could put anything on the screen and people would come to see it. But not for the same reason that someone like Michael Bay was in a similar place. Bay's films utilize manipulation techniques that draw people in to pay money for his movies. That worked for a while, but the diminishing returns inevitably came about and he fell off. People come to see James Cameron because they know that he's going to put all of his sweat, blood, and bank accounts into creating something passionate, well-crafted, and inspiring. And even if we've heard these stories before, we'll know that he'll want to tell that story, and that he'll tell it with every ounce of passion that he has. I think that's what separates this film from every other version of this story. Pocahontas was made to win an Oscar, and most likely tacked on its story to get the attention of the Oscars. Ferngully tacked on its story as well because it was the easiest and most conventional way to get its environmental message across. With Avatar, James Cameron wanted to tell this story. He wanted to throw this effort and money at this story, and if people are willing to come back to see that on its second release, despite probably having seen it 5 times on its initial release, I think they can catch on to his blazing passion for this story.
I see you.
I see you.
Avatar is not a groundbreaking, revolutionary, or original story, but it is a well-paced, well-developed, intricate, and passionate piece of storytelling, making it one of James Cameron's best. Even when you take the visuals out, you still have characters more complex than their roles entail, a well-developed and well-paced version of this story even if we've heard it before, and an onslaught of passion and hard work that only one of the pioneers of the modern blockbuster could give us. If the bare basic story and stock roles aren't unique enough for you, I can't really argue with you, but for me, a passionate filmmaker retelling Fern Gully is still a passionate filmmaker.
This is Jake Sully signing off.
But what are your thoughts? Do you agree with my thoughts on Avatar's script, or do you still think the visuals are the only merit of the film? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button as well as that subscribe button, as I have fresh takes like this on my channel every Friday, as well as quick reviews on all the best new releases. And be sure to follow my Twitter account as well, as I have fresh takes on there that don't quite flesh themselves out to full-fledged videos. I'm CM Waters, and I'll see you next week.